here except let me thank also our colleagues, Dr. Katia Khan, Zaida Banchur, and Dr. Agustin Pancho, and Dr. Peter Weller, and others who joined us this afternoon. So today we are here to launch this webinar series adapted from the illustrated guide produced by WHO, Doing What Matters in Time of Stress, which seeks to equip frontline workers with the practical skills to cope with stress. Promoting mental health and wellness and improving our mental health care is utmost priority to all of us. We welcome UNICEF and the Caribbean Alliance of National Psychological Association, CANPA, partnership in this initiative. Developing coping skills and practicing stress management activities actually help to build individual resilience. We encourage our frontline workers to look after their own mental health while providing support to others, and then others to take care of themselves. There is no healthcare without healthy healthcare workers. We do not have a health system. We are not also unable to deliver everything we are trying to do around vaccination, testing, public health measures, treatment, and so forth. Within our countries, there is a renewed energy among government leaders to make quality mental health care a reality. Much progress has been done. Mental health services should be foundation to our COVID-19 response as well. Countries should incorporate mental health into their COVID response plans and work across sectors to ensure that mental health services are widely available. That's what building back better means to all of us. Countries must adopt the way in which they provide mental health services so that they can safely offer care, including through telemedicine and community-based support. Frontline workers and other vulnerable groups should be given special attention and have access to care and support they need and when they need it. In keeping with this year's theme of mental health care for all, let's make it a reality, which is for World Mental Health Day. We envision our countries with resilient communities and families, individuals, and mental health services that are available and accessible to all who may require it. Today, in Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean countries, the rest of the world, health workers and other vulnerable groups such as children, young people, elderly, have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, also suffering increased rates of stress, anxiety, and depression. In St. Vincent, which is now the host Ministry of Health, the host country of this session, the mental health impact of the pandemic, which is also exacerbated by the volcano eruptions, consequently displaced population and relocation of families, communities, devastated the livelihood of many Vincentians. Those events have restricted schooling and affected social relationships. Chronic stress, as you all know, in life situation can increase the risk of developing depression if you are not coping with the stress well, or help is not there. Colleagues, this afternoon, we'll learn more about these issues from our colleagues who are well equipped to provide this information. The COVID pandemic is not over yet. However, we know what kind of countermeasures have to be there. Reaching out to others who need help, including for mental health services, is one of the ways of addressing the COVID pandemic. Thank you again for being for this opportunity and being here for this webinar. Thank you all, and then welcome. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Gebre, for those words of welcome. and your timely words of encouragement and suggestions for building back better. So facilitating today's session is Dr. Khadija Khan, the President-elect of the Caribbean Alliance of National Psychological Association, CAMPO. Dr. Khan is a consultant clinical psychologist and neurologist. She is currently a lecturer in clinical psychology at the Faculty of Medical Sciences in UWI St. Augustine, and she's also a member of the regional UWI COVID-19 Task Force Psychosocial Unit. And so as we participate in today's session, let us remember that to everything there is a season and a time to laugh and a time to dance. Over to you, Dr. Khan. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence Williams. It was good to hear from Dr. Gabriel give that introduction, for the reason, to emphasize the reason why we're all joined here today to talk about how we can manage our stress better. So welcome to everyone. Thank you for giving up your time this hour today that we're going to spend. And I'm going to jump straight into it, and I'm going to share screen with you. So this is the first in a series of 4 webinars every Thursday, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for all of these 4 webinars. And we're going to talk about doing what matters in times of stress. So a lot of the content that you're going to hear about over these webinars are based on the WHO publication, which you can find online. So you're also free to have a look at this publication, have a read of it. We're going to put the link where you can access it in the chat. And in this session today, we're going to focus specifically, we're going to hear a little bit more about stress, something that's it's not a stranger to any of us, but we're going to hear about how our reactions to stress can cause us to get hooked, and we're going to learn about how we can engage more efficiently. So what is stress? So we all experience it, and stress can refer to our response to situations that feel threatening or challenging. And we feel stressed when we encounter something that threatens our equilibrium, it threatens our peace of mind, it challenges our ability to cope. Now, our stress reactions are very variable and they're very subjective. So what I might find very stressful may differ from what you find very stressful. And my reaction might vary in its intensity. I may have a very strong, intense, overwhelming feeling, whereas somebody else might react differently. But we also know that there are many sources of stress. And if I were to ask you now to put in the chat, what are your stressors? I'm sure I will see a variety of responses. And as we go on, I will ask you to interact with us in the chat. Of these causes of stress, and we can separate them into different categories. So for example, one of the first categories of stress is if it's a catastrophic or traumatic event or a major disaster. So for example, we're all currently in the middle of a global health pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic. That's certainly a major disaster. Many people have been displaced from their homes across the world for different reasons. Our Caribbean counterparts in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are still dealing with the aftermaths of the volcanic eruption, and many of them have been displaced from their homes. Maybe you've had something personal happen to you, so personal tragedy, an accident, etc. All of these will fall under the category of a catastrophic or traumatic event. But stress can also come from life changes or strains. So maybe, we've heard about the school closures and they've been ongoing. So certainly for our children, our school-age children, and even those attending university, not being able to attend school in person can be a source of stress, and an ongoing one at that. If you're dealing with an illness, so whether it's something acute or whether it's the COVID-19 virus, if you're having problems providing for your family due to finances, a change in your job situation, all of these changes can cause stress. And you know what? Sometimes what we think is a positive change can also cause stress. So for example, Christmas is fast approaching and we might think Christmas, it's the holidays, it's a time many of us look forward to, but it can also be a source of stress when we start to think about the finances, the house cleaning, the responsibilities, etc. So sometimes even positive things can be a source of stress. Stresses can also be chronic. So sometimes you're dealing with a situation that's ongoing. So again, the school closures and our children. If you live in a community that is subject to violence on a regular basis, maybe you're in a community that doesn't have good transportation links and it's something you have to deal with all the time. Maybe you've been unemployed for quite a while. Maybe you have a chronic illness, so you're dealing with diabetes or hypertension or another chronic medical condition. So all of these, again, can cause a negative stress reaction in us. And finally, sometimes daily hassles, little things. So stress doesn't always have to come from the big things. Stress can come from little things. So if you're having internet connectivity problems and it's hampering your ability to join in on meetings or to connect with your family and friends, that can be stressful. Maybe you've had an argument with a friend or a family member. That can also be a stressful situation. Little things like you leave the house to go run an errand and you realize you've forgotten your mask. So the thing about these little stressors is that the impact can be cumulative. And when we think about it, it's not as though we're facing only one stressor at any point in time. Often we are facing multiple stresses of different kinds. Would you agree? I think so. So everyone experiences stress. So stress in and of itself is not a negative thing, and it's something that's ubiquitous. It's ever present. So a little bit of stress is not the problem. However, if the amount of stress you are experiencing is very high, and if you perceive it as more threatening and it's overwhelming your ability to cope, that's when it can start to prove to be a problem. So let's look now at how we react to stress and how stress can affect us in different ways. So let's look first at one of the most common ways and popular ways that we know stress affects us. It affects our emotions, our thoughts, and our feelings. That's psychological impact. So in response to a stressor, we might worry, we might get nervous, sometimes we get irritable, we might feel sad, we might cry. Maybe we're so restless, so we just can't sit still and we have difficulty staying calm. We feel tense, etc. So all of these are different ways that we can respond to stress. But it doesn't only affect us psychologically. One aspect of that psychological component is how we think, our cognitive abilities. So sometimes you may find yourself finding it difficult to concentrate or to focus. Maybe you've been having problems with your memory and your concentration and attention. Maybe you've just been overthinking. Things are just running through your head all the time. So you're either thinking about something in the past and how it affected you and you're dwelling on it, or maybe you're thinking about the future and the uncertainty that the future holds. So all of these are different ways that stress can affect us as well. And you know what? It can also take a physical toll on us. And sometimes we don't recognize physical symptoms as being the result of stress. So I want you to reflect as well as we are going through these different symptoms. Which are the ones you're affected by? How about your friends and family members? Do you recognize it in them or your colleagues at work? Let's look at some of these physical symptoms. So if you're experiencing headaches, back pain, upset stomach, tension in your muscle, more aches and pains, you're feeling fatigued all of the time, maybe you're having a toothache, a digestive problem, all of these may be signs that you're affected by stress. Yeah. And if you're also dealing with a physical condition or a medical illness, stress can also exacerbate that. So you may be finding it hard to manage your diabetes or your cholesterol levels or your blood pressure. So thinking of all of these, and here's where I'd like you to participate in the chat. In what ways are you affected by stress? Can you tell us? Do you see more of those physical symptoms? Do you see the cognitive symptoms? Or do you see the psychological symptoms? And sometimes it may be a combination of all three. So can you take a few minutes And I'll check into the chat to see your responses. Let's see the ways that you have found that you are affected by stress. So are you a worrier? Have you found yourself getting a little more short-tempered with those around you? Let's see. So I see Sharisa said a lack of sleep. And sometimes we may be sleeping less and sometimes we may be sleeping more. Difficulty concentrating. More people, another one is saying the cognitive symptoms, worrying, insomnia, headaches and back pains, fear. So already we are seeing a whole variety of different ways that people are affected by stress. Overworked, insomnia, irritable, easily irritated, eating more, mainly physical, headaches, shoulder pain, chest tightness. I see anxiety, sleeplessness, headaches, weight loss, insomnia, fatigue, headaches, back pain, irritability, difficulty concentrating has come up again, overthinking, lack of sleep, shoulder tension. I go to the refrigerator late at night. Ooh, I empathize with that one. I'm guilty of that as well, that midnight snacking. Neck pain, headache, inability to concentrate, feeling overworked, anxiety, loss of appetite, increased appetite. And so you're seeing we have people experiencing both ends of the spectrum. Some people have a loss of appetite and some are eating more. Body aches, headaches, sleep issues, cognitive, shoulder pain, cramps in the legs and back, rapid heart rate, inability to disconnect from work, shoulder tension, burnout, more burnout, overthinking, short-tempered, overeating, fatigue, short fuse, a lack of energy, more cognitive symptoms, easily annoyed. So thank you for all of your engagement in the chat. It's good that you have this self-awareness of how stress affects you. So sometimes if you recognize the symptom that you're having, you could probably, take a step back, and we're going to talk. This is what these webinars are about, that we know we are being affected by stress. And when it starts to affect us negatively, we need to have the skills to be able to deal with it. Okay? So what I like about the responses in the chat, and you can see each other's responses, is that it emphasizes that this stress response is subjective. So different people respond differently, and it's also variable. So some people respond with less intensity, somewhat more. But all of these feelings, behaviors, and thoughts that you have put here, they're not in and of themselves abnormal. In fact, these are quite normal reactions to stress. And stress reactions are in themselves normal. But they can become a problem if we get hooked by them. Hooked, Dr. Khan? What do you mean by hooked? What kind of hook are we speaking about? A fishing hook, a little hook you rest your keys on? Well, let's look at that concept some more. So when we think about a hook and we think about something being on a hook, we know that it can't get away because the hook traps it there and it keeps it there. So for example, one minute you might be playing with your children, you all are playing a game, and then you know what? You get hooked by some thought or some feeling, and it takes you away from that moment. So some intrusive thought or some feeling comes into your mind and it hooks you and it distracts you. You might be enjoying a nice meal with your family. So everybody sat down and enjoying a nice home-cooked meal, having conversation, interacting, and next minute you get hooked by an angry thought and feeling, and that takes over. And then it changes the whole tone and interaction of the moment. Now, hooking and being hooked by these negative thoughts and feelings, they have consequences. Yeah? And when we get hooked, they can pull us away from our values. What do I mean by values? Well, we all have them. These are our ideas and desires about what is important in our life and what's the kind of person that I want to be. So for example, those of you who are parents at the session, you might have thoughts about what kind of parent you want to be. You want to be loving, wise, attentive to your children. You want to be calm, protective, courageous, and caring. Yeah. And this, our values apply to all of the roles we adopt in life. So whether it's co-worker, caregiver, whether it's just being a member of a community, we all have values that we ascribe to and that are important to us. So just by all of you who are in this webinar, all of you are acting on some of your values. So maybe you care about your well-being. Maybe you care about your family and others. And so that drove you to come now and to participate, to find out more about how you can effectively manage stress and respond to stress. So being hooked then is something we need to figure out how to deal with, because it can take us away from our values. And when we get hooked and it's taking us away from our values, it can lead to us responding in ways that can make our lives worse. And we call these away moves. So being hooked can make us engage in these away moves. And let's look at some of those. And some of you mentioned these in the chat already. So in addition to mentioning your symptoms, so those emotions and feelings and how it's affecting your thoughts, some of you mentioned some of these. So for example, you get into more arguments, or you're spending a lot of time lying in bed. You're staying away from friends and loved ones. Maybe you're more irritable, suspicious. Sometimes, you might be overprotective. Have you been isolating or withdrawing from activity? So notwithstanding the COVID restrictions, which we know has put restrictions on our ability to interact, maybe you still find yourself shying away from opportunities to interact and find yourself isolating from those. Have you been procrastinating more? Maybe you've just been a lot more silent. You're just not engaging or speaking or as verbal as much as before. Maybe you've resorted to the inappropriate use of humor, laughing at things that probably aren't funny. Has it affected your sleep? Either you're having too little of it. Some of you mentioned insomnia, and some of you mentioned sleeping too much. Maybe it's affected your appetite. Some of you mentioned the loss of appetite, and some of you mentioned, eating at all different hours, or probably eating more, resorting to more comfort eating. It can also affect your sexual desire and functioning. So you may want to look at your intimate relationships and see if it's affecting you there. And it can also affect our use of substances. So we may find ourselves using more substances, marijuana, alcohol, cigarettes, and other drugs and substances, even things like caffeine. So I'd like you now to reflect on away moves and think about when you are stressed and when you get hooked by these negative thoughts and feelings, what is the impact that it has on you? Or what have you seen in others as well? Have you seen people in your circles withdraw more? Have you seen people more short-tempered? So can you share a few of those in the chat with us? What has been the impact of some of this hooking? So I'll tell you, so one of the things I've seen in my workspace is that we're certainly not interacting as much. Yeah, so there's been some sorts of withdrawing. We don't have the usual amount of camaraderie and interaction. And so I'm seeing here, Sharon is saying, she's noticed that short temper, that, that very quick to be triggered, very quick to be irritated by others. We're seeing isolation and silence, anger again, being suspicious and irritable, easily agitated, the withdrawal. I'm seeing getting too comfortable. Somebody's saying they're getting a bit too comfortable in the withdrawal. And that's the thing, because we have this overarching impact of the pandemic, or another disaster that we may be dealing with if you're in a country that's been affected by the volcano, like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You may find that because of some of the restrictions that have been imposed, that you may have had to withdraw a bit from interaction, but even when there are now opportunities to re-engage, you may still find yourself not taking advantage of them. Now, I'm seeing, so they're coming in really fast now. We're seeing changes in sleep, isolation, more withdrawal, irritability, abrupt conversation, yes. A decreased sense of humor. People are, we're losing that sense to just perhaps relax and be in the moment and use humor. Changes in sleep and eating. The atmosphere at home can get tense when I'm stressed and become irritable. Yes, indeed, it can. I think many of us can identify with that in our families. Inappropriate sense of humor, withdrawal, people not trusting each other, so more suspicion. Changes with interaction, more distancing, and perhaps beyond the distancing that's required to keep us safe during the pandemic. Irritability, more insomnia, changes in appetite, fearful. People are talking less, hardly laughs or smiles. And sometimes, because we have to be all masked up in many spaces, we do lose a little bit of that. So sometimes I find I have to exaggerate my smile and make sure it reaches my eyes. Or I have to give, an exaggerated head nod so people know what my reaction is. So I do also identify with that one. Kishandra says outbursts. Yeah, so that temper might get the better of us and we might have those verbal outbursts. So indeed, all of these are away moves and all of these are things that take us away from our values, where we want to be patient, we want to be kind and considerate, we want to be loving, we want to be resilient. So, my gosh, all of us identifying with so many of those away moves. What then do we do about it? So what do we do? Because that's all of us. So is there something? Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, there is. And I'm just looking at a couple more of the responses that came in the chat. So an increased demonstration of insecurity, and that may manifest in different ways. So whatever people are feeling on the inside, it's probably coming out more. Changes in appetite, people are talking less. Yeah. So as we are seeing, so many away moves are taking place. So what do we do? Is there something we could do? Yes, there most definitely is. So first thing we want to do is we must learn to focus and engage. And that's the first step. And in the duration of the webinars, as we proceed, we're going to talk about different sets of skills and how you can develop them. But one of the first steps in that process of doing what matters in times of stress is this ability to engage. Now, when we are stressed, we find it hard to engage in life. What do I mean by engage? It means when you're doing something, you give it your full attention, okay? You're not allowing the thoughts to distract you. You're not trying to multitask and attend to different things at different times because you feel that they're all pressing. So I'd like you to think about the last time you ate something. Maybe it was lunch. Maybe it was this morning. I want you to think about the last time you listened to music. Huh? Now, when you give your full attention to something, that's what we mean by saying you're engaged in it or focused on it. But when we get hooked by our thoughts and feelings, it threatens that and we become unfocused. So you're having your meal, but you get hooked by the thoughts and feelings, and so you're attending to those and you're not there in the moment thinking about your meal or enjoying your meal. Yeah? So when we do things in an unfocused way, we're unable to enjoy them to its fullest. We're unable to get the full satisfaction of doing it. And sometimes we even do them poorly. So again, if you're doing a chore, if you're having an interaction with your child, all of these things can take away from your ability to stay in that moment and engage. So one of the skills we want to sensitize you today is how can you practice on focusing and engaging. Okay, so let's delve into that a little bit more. So if you can learn to be more engaged and focus better, then you will be able to handle stress better. Yeah? And you can practice this skill with any activity that you do. So whether you're drinking a cup of tea, whether you're taking a shower, as I mentioned, whether you're listening to music, I want you to practice being engaged in it. And we're going to talk about the different steps that can help us with that. And what you'll find is that as you start to handle stress better, you're going to see the results. So you're going to find your relationships are more satisfying. You're going to be able to do important things better. Yeah? So some of the research has shown us, if we look at couple interactions, some of the research looking at couples, married couples, intimate couples, what causes sometimes that distress and breakdown in communication is when one person feels invalidated. And I'll give you an example of that. So let's say you're busy attending to something on your phone, right? You're trying to answer emails, you're trying to respond to messages, and your partner is trying to tell you something. And it could be something like, wow, you see that bird outside? Look at that hummingbird. I'm so glad we planted those flowers because now the hummingbirds get to come and feed in the garden. And they're trying to get your attention, trying to engage you in that conversation. And you are still here and they're saying like, yeah, no, Okay, the bird, I see it, right, I see the bird, yeah. How do you think that makes them feel? Yeah. So it makes them feel invalidated, it makes them feel unimportant, and we also are not connecting with them in that moment. So we don't get any satisfaction in that moment. However, if we're able to fully engage, and in that example, it was an example of an engagement in a conversation, then we can see how if we unhook ourselves from those thoughts and feelings that are pulling us away from that engagement, we can see how it will yield some positive benefits. Yeah? So what I'd like us to do now is we're going to listen to an audio that's going to talk you through an activity and engagement to help you boost your engagement skills. And this audio was voiced by Sanjo Ogunsei from Lagos, Nigeria, who has a very, very soothing voice. So if you have a drink of water next to you, grab it. We're going to use it in this activity. If not, while I'm talking here, feel free to grab a drink of water, get a cup of water, because it's going to work best. Actually do the activity while he's talking you through it. Okay? So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And so promoting this engagement is going to help you. Now, some of you might be thinking, Dr. Khan, that sounds a little bit like mindfulness. And indeed it does. There are the overlaps. There's some similar concepts. So as you know, mindfulness involves shutting out all of the distractions. So all those thoughts that are attempting to hook you, those feelings that are attempting to hook you, we shut them out and we refocus on what we're doing in this moment, giving our full attention and full concentration to this moment. Okay, so hopefully you have a drink nearby. I have one here. So let's listen in and follow along with this activity.
One thing that helps people manage stress better is learning how to get less lost or distracted by your thoughts and feelings, and how to refocus and pay attention and engage more fully in what you are doing. When you pay attention and engage fully in any activity, you will do it better and you will find it more satisfying. This is true even when you have to do things that are dull or tedious, or boring or frustrating. We are going to do an exercise so you can see for yourself. The aim of this exercise is to demonstrate how we often pay less attention to things that are familiar to us and fail to appreciate them, and how when we really pay attention, life is more interesting and fulfilling. So here is your challenge: to develop the skills of paying curious attention and engaging fully in whatever you are doing. We are going to ask you to take several minutes to drink a single mouthful of this drink. And your challenge is to really pay attention to everything that you do in this process of drinking. Your aim is simply to keep your attention on noticing all of your sensations when drinking: the smell, the taste, the feel of the liquid inside your mouth, the feeling of swallowing. And whenever you notice that your attention has wandered, gently bring your attention back to the drink. So we invite you to sit straight, and please do this exercise in silence. Take hold of the bottle, cup, or whatever contains the drink, and observe it as if you are a curious person who has never seen an object like this before. Notice the shape and the color of this bottle or cup. Notice how the light shines through it or bounces off it. Notice the texture of the surface. Run your fingers over it and notice what it feels like. Notice the weight of it in your hand. Look at the liquid inside it. Notice the way the light reflects off the surface. Gently move the bottle or cup so as to make the liquid inside swirl around. Notice the patterns on the surface of the liquid as it swirls. Now raise it to your nose and smell it. If your liquid is tea or coffee or something else with a distinctive smell, then inhale it deeply through your nose and really notice the aroma. And now raise the bottle or cup to your mouth and rest it against your lips and pause for a moment before drinking. And still without drinking, notice what is happening inside your mouth. You may notice saliva forming, or your mouth getting warmer, or an urge to drink. And in a moment, do not do it yet. We will ask you to take one small sip as slowly as you can, and then close your mouth again. But let the liquid stay inside your mouth without swallowing it. And so now, as slowly as you can, take a small sip. Then close your mouth and let the liquid stay there, inside your mouth. And ever so slowly and gently, roll the liquid around inside your mouth. Feel it against your tongue and inside your cheeks. And if this liquid has a taste, really notice it. and then as slowly as you can, swallow it and notice the sound of swallowing. And now coming to the end of the exercise, look around you. What are 5 things you can see? Listen carefully. What are 3 or 4 things you can hear? As you breathe in the air, what can you smell? Notice where you are and what you are doing. Open your hands and gently run your fingers over where you have been sitting. Notice what this surface feels like under your fingers. Next time you are hooked by your thoughts and feelings, and therefore not really paying attention to whomever you are with or whatever you are doing, try to really engage in whatever it is you are doing, like you just did with this exercise of paying attention to drinking, and notice what happens. One thing that helps people manage stress better is learning how to.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to participate along with the activity, or as it was going through, you're imagining yourself doing the activity. I know I certainly was. I had my water in front of me. And that's why I switched off my video so that I could engage in the water drinking and not have to worry about who might be seeing me. But that's the thing about staying engaged. It's going to take intentional purpose. It's going to take your setting aside that time to fully indulge in that process. So over the next week, my challenge to you is to practice being engaged, to practice staying engaged. So here are some examples. And while we're going through these examples, I'd like you to think about what you're going to practice staying engaged in and put it in the chat for us. And I'm seeing here some of the responses in the chat. So Sharon says, wow, great exercise. Sudera found it really relaxing. Patterson wants to continue. Indeed, who knew water could taste so good and be so satisfying and fulfilling? Normally, we're just gulping it down. We don't even think twice about it. It becomes very procedural. You grab it, you drink, you put it aside. Yes? Elaine said, I didn't know water could taste so good. Sudara says she's going to do that with her lunch after. That sounds like a great idea. I'm sure that lunch is going to taste twice as good. Sharice is saying, can we get copies of this lecture? This is different and it feels good. We're really glad to hear that. Certainly, we are recording the presentation. We also sent you a link to the publication. And if you like this audio exercise, it's also accessible through the link on the website. I myself find his voice very soothing to listen to. Someone else said it's very relaxing, very interesting and relaxing. And so that's the whole point. And we only took a few minutes. And sometimes, you know, in our busy days when we're multitasking, we have all of these multiple roles that we're playing. Sometimes we feel, I don't have time for this. But I want you to think about ways and activities where you can remain more engaged and remind yourself of the benefits. So let's look at some of these examples here. So over the next week, can you try one of these or more? So practice while talking to your family or friends. So as you're talking to them, listen to the tone of their voice. Watch their facial expressions and their body language. Give them your full attention. And I know that I've been guilty of this. I really enjoy watching TV with my nieces, and sometimes we watch the same movie over. So it's a movie I'm familiar with the plot. So sometimes I'm watching, but I'm also on my phone doing something else. And then my niece will be like, Auntie, watch, you're not watching. And then it will jolt me out, and I'll remember that this was supposed to be an activity where we're sharing time together. And I got hooked. I got hooked by a thought and a feeling. Maybe I got hooked by the thought that, oh, there's some work I need to do, or I'm worried that I need to meet a deadline. And because I got hooked, it made me do an away move. Yeah, I was withdrawing, I was physically present, but I was not fully engaged in that activity. So perhaps you can practice while you're engaging with your family and friends. Practice while playing with your children. So give them and the game your full attention. So I'm also looking in on the chat. Navilia is saying, I'm going to listen and pay attention more this week. No distractions with my family. That sounds fantastic. Chandalin is causing a few chuckles in the chat. We'll try it on the next boring meeting I am forced to attend. Chandalin, you remind me of an experience I had as a graduate student. And I was sitting in a lecture, and there are only 7 of us in the room. So it's a small room, and I found myself drifting and falling asleep and fighting off, this urge to fall asleep. And so I said, come on, that's not me, that's not how I am, and I'm not getting to enjoy this class. So the next week I said, you know what? I'm going to pay more attention. And I'm going to engage and ask more questions and contribute more and fully attend to what's going on, as well as how I am feeling about it. And it works. So we do encourage you to try it in your next board meeting. And if it happens before next week, come back in next week's webinar and tell us about it. Joy said it's a great exercise for group work. Indeed it is. Yes. So Celia said she's going to practice. So yes, I'm glad the responses are coming in the chat. So for the rest of you, can you identify an activity that you want to try? So people are already mentioning their families, their children, while doing chores. So that's a third one. So you can practice being engaged while doing a chore. So if you're washing dishes, just focus on the task at hand. Give your full attention to that task. So if you're washing dishes, the temperature of the water, the feeling of the suds on your hand, applying that pressure of the sponge to the dishes, the rinse, the satisfying clink when you put a clean dish into the dish rack. So be engaged in even the simple things that you might be doing over the next week. So let's see what you're going to try to be more engaged in. Some of the responses are coming through. So in the garden, and I'm sure your garden will love that as well, quiet time with God, that sounds great too. Engage in my daughter's stories that she tells after school. That's such a lovely one because we know they love to tell us their stories. And not only do they want to tell, they also want to see our reaction and hear our reaction. Naima says she wants to practice engaging in my rest. Indeed, sometimes you're supposed to be resting, but guess what? You're being hooked by all these thoughts and feelings. Talking to my family. Cherie says it's opened her eye because washing dishes is what you have in mind. Cherie, that's win-win. It's going to be a win for you as you practice engaging and dealing with your stress. And you're going to end up with a clean kitchen and an empty sink because of it. So when you are engaging in your activities, I also want you to be aware that it is likely that you're going to find yourself getting hooked again. Yeah. So you go into the task with all the good intentions, and then a distracting thought will come and enter your mind. And I don't want you to get anxious or tense about that. That is perfectly natural. In fact, I'm going to bet that it will happen to us, that a thought or a feeling is going to come in and we're going to get hooked. But we can unhook. We can unhook by simply refocusing and re-engaging on the task at hand. Okay? So whatever task you're trying, just think about it. When you realize, wait a minute, my attention is waning, or I'm getting pulled in a different direction, I want you to picture that hook that's trying to drag you away, and picture yourself unhooking and re-engaging in the task at hand. Okay? So as we're coming to the end of this webinar, and I'm looking at some of the chat as well. So I'm saying go walking and pay closer attention to nature. Indeed, enjoy the outside, enjoy what nature has to offer. Elaine says, thanks for the homework. You're welcome, Elaine. I've been so busy, and it seems like I'm trying to do a million things at one time. I've been so mentally exhausted. And that's the thing. We get caught up in this hamster wheel. We have a never-ending to-do list. We have all of our multiple roles we're managing, whether you're husband, wife, father, caregiver, daughter, co-worker, manager, supervisor, and we're trying to juggle all of these roles, and there's so many things that we're doing, and we think that we do not have time to stop and take a minute or to fully engage. Sometimes we feel like we have to multitask, and to do anything less is wasting time. And so we need to unhook ourselves from that negative thought and try and engage more and focus more in the moment. And what we'll do in the next webinar is that we're going to continue along this route, because we're going to look at what if I'm trying to engage, but this thought and feeling is so intense, and so I can't unhook in that moment. What do I do then? So we heard the concept of grounding being mentioned in the audio, but what we will do is we're going to look at this in more detail, and we're going to learn some more techniques in grounding. Okay? So as we're wrapping up now, and I'm looking at some of these, because if you come back next week, and we hope you do, many of you have registered for all 4 webinars already, and that's fantastic. So we look forward to seeing all of you again next week. We'll do a check-in, and we'll see if you managed to do some of your activities. So I'm seeing here yoga. I'm seeing more engaged in my fishing trips and fishing. And you know, that's nice. So whether you catch anything or not, just be engaged in that moment. Yeah. Siobhan is saying the juggling makes the focus more challenging. It very much does. So even recognizing that pressure we feel to juggle, I think let's recognize that as a thought that gets us hooked and takes us away from these values that we care about and that we want to embody. And let's not be too harsh on ourselves. Yeah, because what you'll find is that sometimes you may be better at it one day, and then you lapse this evening because you've had a particularly hard day. And so we don't want to throw everything away. You're just going to continue. At the next opportunity, you try again to engage. Okay? So at this point, what I'd like is in the chat, can you share with us what was one takeaway you got from today's webinar? Something that resonated with you. Was it recognizing the effect that stress has on you, realizing that it has an emotional impact, a cognitive impact, a physical impact? Maybe it was recognizing how you have been, this concept of hooking, how we get hooked by our thoughts and feelings. Maybe you're starting to pay more attention to the away moves that you've been engaging in that you want to move away from. Maybe you're thinking about what you want to engage more in over the next week. So please share with us in the chat what what's your takeaway today, or what resonated with you. And what you'll also see is that we're going to send you an email, those of you who have attended today, to thank you for your participation. And if you haven't done so already, most of you have, to register for webinar 2. And we also have a very short survey. It's an anonymous survey. It takes less than a minute to complete. The link is in the chat, so feel free to click on it and complete it, or you'll get it via email. And let's see what people are going to do. I'm seeing cycling, fishing, some good feedback here. This was so good. I learned things I can apply to my own practice and to help others right away. I think there's nothing more than we could have asked for that. Better than I expected, and worth this time every Tuesday. Fantastic. We look forward to seeing you all every Tuesday at this hour. And some of the takeaways: how to be deliberate and intentional about relaxation. I like that. Radical relaxing. That's what we need to do. Sharian spoke about the small stressors, those ones we don't realize that build up. So whether it's the internet, whether it's your mask, whether it's somebody bad drive you on the road, all of these things are cumulative. Yeah. Unhooking. Someone said they realized that they are actually stressed. Yeah, I think that's really good self-awareness. The impact of stress, that engaging can be difficult, but it is possible. Indeed it is. And like many skills, the more you practice it, the better you're going to be at it. Recognizing the need to consciously focus when I'm hooked, indeed. The away moves on how to unhook, the concept of hooking. I'm glad that that's stuck. Some things we want to hook us, and I'm glad that that hooked us. The importance of engaging even with ordinary tasks like washing dishes, indeed. While listening, I realized I need to work hard to relieve my stressors. Yeah, it's helped me refocus and gather peaceful energy. That sounds like a great thing. Learning how to unhook, the coping strategies. Somebody found this very engaging. We're so glad to hear that. Away moves and unhooking. The importance of focusing and engaging in simple tasks, not just the big ones, but the simple everyday ones. More engaging, more focusing. Somebody liked that we were able to take, a difficult topic. We're also bombarded by stress, more so during this pandemic. So I'm glad that you found it useful and practical. Hooking, staying engaged, focusing aspect, engaging, like learning the new concepts. So thank you so much for all of your feedback. We appreciate it very much. And at this point, we just have about a minute in hand. We like to keep to time because we know you have many other things to engage your attention with come 2 o'clock. So thank you again for your interaction. Someone is saying they're going to share this lecture with their staff. We're glad to hear that. And please encourage them. You can use that same registration link to sign up for all of the webinars. So please feel free to share the registration link with anyone you think would benefit from it. And you know what's so fantastic about this webinar as well? So I didn't ask you in the chat because we captured it in the registration form. We have people from all over the Caribbean, and sometimes it's few things that unite us as a Caribbean. We have few opportunities. Watching cricket is one, but we know that has its ups and downs. But this is another one. So it's fantastic. We have people from Jamaica, St. Kitts, St. Vincent, Trinidad, all over the Caribbean, St. Lucia. Forgive me, it's all of the countries. I won't remember all of them now. So it's fantastic that we're all able to join. And I really would like to thank our hosts. So that's PAHO, that's UNICEF, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and their Ministry of Health. So we'd like to thank them for this session. Oh, and I'm seeing more countries are chiming in. Grenada, Haiti, welcome. Bahamas, Antigua, Nevis is in the house as well. So thank you, all of you. And on this note, we're spot on 2 o'clock. I'm going to bid you goodbye and see you again next week. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you very much. Very enlightening. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All the best.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.